In the shadowy halls of Ravenwood Hall, a cryptic poem arrives, like a whisper of doom, promising secrets buried deep and death waiting for one false step. What if a gathering of elegant guests for a literary weekend turns deadly when poet Victor Crane is bludgeoned to death, his blood staining the library floor? As more verses of the poem appear, hinting at hidden scandals, blackmail, and forbidden loves from the past, the questions mount. Who among the suspects, the proud Sir Reginald, his fragile daughter Clara, the secretive psychiatrist Dr. Fraser, the dramatic novelist Beatrice Langley and her nervous husband Gerald, or the gracious hostess, Lady Eleanor, wields the killer's hand? And can the brilliant Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, unravel the web of lies before another victim falls? Dive into novel secrets and surprising twists, where every clue leads to a shocking revelation that will leave you breathless. Because in this Agatha Christie-style mystery, no secret stays buried forever. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Ravenwood Hall. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze over the rolling hills of Devon as Captain Arthur Hastings steered his motorcar along the winding lane toward Ravenwood Hall. The invitation, penned in an elegant hand, lay on the passenger seat, its words still puzzling him. Dear Captain Hastings, your presence and that of Monsieur Hercule Poirot is requested at Ravenwood Hall for a weekend of literary diversion. A matter of some delicacy requires your friend's singular talents, Lady Eleanor Worthington. No further explanation, only a date and time, and the promise of a gathering unlike any other. Hastings glanced at the diminutive figure beside him. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his pinstriped suit, adjusted his moustache with a gloved finger, his green eyes glinting with curiosity. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice precise as ever, "you are troubled by this invitation, n'est-ce pas? You think, perhaps, it is too vague, too mysterious." "Well, yes," Hastings admitted, gripping the wheel as the car rattled over a stone bridge. "It's dashed odd, Poirot. Lady Worthington's a widow, lives quietly, doesn't she? Why summon us to a literary weekend? And what's this matter of delicacy?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The English aristocracy, Hastings. They do not send for Hercule Poirot unless the matter is grave. A literary diversion, you say? Bah! It is a pretext. The true puzzle lies beneath the surface, like the roots of a tree hidden in the earth. We shall see." Ravenwood Hall loomed into view, a sprawling Jacobean mansion of weathered stone, its ivy-clad towers silhouetted against the fading light. The gravel drive crunched under the tires as Hastings parked beside a Bentley and a sleek Rolls-Royce. The air carried the scent of roses and impending rain, and a butler, stiff as a board, greeted them at the grand entrance. "Welcome, gentlemen," intoned, his eyes lingering on Poirot's polished shoes. "Lady Worthington awaits you in the library." The interior of Ravenwood Hall was a study in faded grandeur. Oak-panelled walls, chandeliers dim with age, and portraits of stern-faced Worthingtons gazing down. The library, however, was warm and inviting, its shelves groaning under the weight of leather-bound volumes. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows over the assembled guests, who turned as Poirot and Hastings entered. Lady Eleanor Worthington, a tall woman in her 50s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, rose from a high-backed chair. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, how good of you to come," she said, her voice cultured but tinged with strain. "Allow me to introduce my guests." The introductions revealed a curious mix. There was Sir Reginald Thorne, a retired barrister with a hawkish face and a habit of tapping his cane impatiently. Beside him stood his daughter, Clara Thorne, a pale young woman whose nervous glances suggested unease. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, a psychiatrist with a penchant for stroking his beard, nodded politely. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a flamboyant novelist in her 40s, wore a scarlet dress that clashed with the room's muted tones. Her husband, Gerald Langley, a stockbroker with a perpetually distracted air, hovered at her side. Finally, there was Mr. Victor Crane, a poet of minor renown, whose gaunt frame and intense eyes gave him the look of a man haunted by his own verses. "A literary weekend, Lady Worthington?" Poirot inquired, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "You have gathered a most intriguing circle." Lady Eleanor's smile faltered. "Yes, well, it is a celebration of sorts. My late husband, Lord Worthington, was a patron of the arts. This weekend honors his legacy. We shall discuss literature, share poetry, and perhaps unravel a mystery." Her gaze darted to a small mahogany table where a single sheet of paper lay, its edges curling slightly. Hastings followed her glance and noticed the paper bore a handwritten poem, its ink dark and deliberate. Before he could inquire, Mrs. Langley clapped her hands. "Oh, a mystery! How thrilling! Is it one of those treasure hunts, Lady Eleanor, or something more sinister?" "Patience, Beatrice," Sir Reginald snapped, his cane striking the floor. "Let our hostess explain." Lady Eleanor hesitated, then lifted the poem. "This arrived yesterday, unsigned, slipped under the door. I thought it a jest at first, but it unsettles me." She handed it to Poirot, who adjusted his pince-nez and read aloud in his precise, accented voice. "In Ravenwood's heart, where shadows creep, a secret lies, buried deep. 4 lines to guide, 4 truths to know, but one false step, and death shall grow." The room fell silent, save for the crackle of the fire, while Gerald Langley muttered something about "damned nonsense." Poirot folded the paper neatly. "Most curious," he murmured. "A poem that speaks of secrets and death. Tell me, Lady Worthington, who knew of this gathering?" "Only those present," she replied. "And the staff, of course. I invited each guest personally." "And yet," Poirot said, his eyes scanning the room, "someone has sent this warning, or perhaps a challenge. Hercule Poirot does not ignore such things." Dinner followed, a tense affair despite the exquisite pheasant and claret. Conversation danced around the poem, with Mrs. Langley speculating wildly about hidden treasure, and Sir Reginald dismissing it as childish drivel. Clara barely spoke, her fork trembling, while Dr. Fraser observed everyone with clinical detachment. Victor Crane, meanwhile, scribbled notes on a napkin, his expression unreadable. As the evening drew to a close, Poirot leaned toward Hastings. "Observe, mon ami," he whispered. "The poem is the key, but the true mystery is in their faces. Fear, guilt, curiosity, each tells a story. Tomorrow we shall begin to unravel it." Hastings nodded, though the cryptic poem and the strained atmosphere left him uneasy. As they retired to their rooms, the wind howled outside, and Ravenwood Hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the darkness to reveal its secrets. Chapter 2. The Shadow Falls. The morning dawned gray and heavy over Ravenwood Hall, the sky bruised with clouds that promised rain. Captain Hastings awoke to the distant toll of a church bell, its mournful chime cutting through the stillness of the Devon countryside. He dressed quickly, his mind still tangled with the cryptic poem from the previous evening and the undercurrent of unease that had permeated the dinner. Poirot, he knew, would already be up, his meticulous habits unyielding even in the country. As Hastings descended the grand staircase, the house felt oppressively quiet, the kind of silence that seemed to hold secrets in its folds. The butler, Grayson, stood at the foot of the stairs, his face ashen and his hands clasped tightly. "Good morning, Grayson," Hastings said, attempting cheer. "Is breakfast served?" The butler's lips trembled. "Captain Hastings, sir, there's been a terrible incident. In the library, Lady Eleanor requests your presence, and Monsieur Poirot's immediately." Hastings' stomach lurched. He hurried upstairs to fetch Poirot, who was adjusting his tie with maddening precision in front of a mirror. "Mon ami, you are agitated," Poirot observed, his green eyes flicking to Hastings' flushed face. "What has occurred?" "Something's happened in the library," Hastings replied breathlessly. Grayson looked like he'd seen a ghost. Poirot's expression sharpened. "Alors, let us waste no time. The library, you say, where the poem was disarray." The heavy curtains were half drawn, casting long shadows across the room. Books lay scattered on the floor, as if someone had swept them from a shelf in haste. In the center of the room, sprawled across the Persian rug, lay Victor Crane, the poet. His gaunt face was frozen in a grimace, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A thin trickle of blood seeped from a wound at his temple, staining the rug beneath him. Beside him lay a brass candlestick, its base smeared with crimson. Lady Eleanor stood near the fireplace, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "I found him like this," she whispered. "Not half an hour ago. I came to check the fire and, oh, it's dreadful." Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements precise and unhurried. He examined the wound, the candlestick and the surrounding floor, his gloved fingers hovering but never touching. "The blow was struck with force," he murmured. "And recently, I think. The blood is still wet. Tell me, Lady Eleanor, what time did you discover Monsieur Crane?" 8 o'clock. Perhaps a little before," she replied, her voice unsteady. "I sent Grayson for you at once." Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on the scattered books and a small writing desk in the corner. A single sheet of paper, identical to the one bearing the poem, lay crumpled near the desk. He retrieved it carefully, smoothing it out to reveal a second verse, written in the same bold hand. "One truth is gone, the first to fall, a whispered lie in Ravenwood's hall. 3 more remain, their secrets to keep, but tread with care, for death runs deep." Hastings shivered as Poirot read the words aloud. "Good Lord, Poirot, it's as if the poem predicted this." "No, no, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "A poem does not predict. It is written by a hand, a mind, a purpose. This is no prophecy, but a plan, or perhaps a taunt." The other guests began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Sir Reginald Thorne leaned heavily on his cane, his face thunderous. "What's this nonsense? Crane, dead? Preposterous!" Clara Thorne clung to her father's arm, her eyes wide with fear. Dr. Malcolm Fraser knelt briefly beside the body, confirming what Poirot had already deduced. Death was instantaneous, likely within the last hour. A single blow to the head. Mrs. Beatrice Langley let out a theatrical gasp, clutching her husband's arm. "Murder? In Ravenwood Hall? Oh, Gerald, it's like one of my novels." Gerald Langley, this morning. The question hung in the air, heavy as the storm clouds outside. Sir Reginald spoke first, his voice gruff. "I was in my room, dressing. Clara was with me until 7:30, weren't you, girl?" Clara nodded faintly. "Yes, father. I went to the drawing room afterward to read." Dr. Fraser cleared his throat. "I was in the garden, walking. I find the morning air conducive to thought." Mrs. Langley tossed her head. "I was in my room, writing. Inspiration strikes early, you know. Gerald was with me, weren't you, darling?" Gerald hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I was there." Lady Eleanor, still shaken, said, "I was in the dining room, overseeing breakfast preparations until I came here." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his gaze lingering on each face. "And none of you heard or saw anything unusual? No footsteps, no cries?" A chorus of denials followed, each guest's voice tinged with varying degrees of conviction. Hastings watched Poirot closely, noting the slight tilt of his head, the way his fingers tapped lightly against his palm, a sure sign his little grey cells were at work. "Very well," Poirot said at last. "I shall examine this room further, and I request that no one leaves Ravenwood Hall until the matter is resolved. The police will be informed, but until they arrive, Hercule Poirot takes charge." As the guests dispersed, whispering among themselves, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Observe, mon ami, the second verse. It speaks of 1 truth gone and 3 more remain. This suggests a pattern, a sequence. Victor Crane was the first. We must discover what truth he represented and who feared its revelation." Hastings glanced at the body, now covered with a sheet brought by Grayson. "Do you think the killer is one of them, Poirot? They all seemed shocked, but—" "Shock can be feigned, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low. "And secrets, they are like shadows, always present, even in the brightest light. We shall find this killer, but first, we must understand the poem. It is the thread that will unravel this tapestry of deceit." As the rain began to patter against the library windows, Hastings felt a chill that had little to do with the weather. Ravenwood Hall, once a place of elegance and warmth, now seemed a stage for murder, and the cryptic poem its deadly script. Chapter 3. The Methodical Mind. The library of Ravenwood Hall, now a scene of grim purpose, was sealed off by the butler Grayson under Poirot's precise instructions. The body of Victor Crane remained under its sheet, awaiting the arrival of the local police, who were delayed by the worsening storm. Rain lashed the windows, scattered books and blood-stained rug. Poirot had requested solitude to examine the scene, but he permitted Hastings to remain, knowing his friend's loyalty, if not his deductive prowess, was invaluable. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft yet commanding, "you will observe and record in that excellent memory of yours. Every detail, however small, is a piece of the puzzle." Hastings nodded, though he felt out of his depth. "Righto, Poirot, but it's a ghastly business. Crane struck down like that, and that poem. It's as if the killer is playing a game." "A game, perhaps," Poirot replied, his green eyes glinting as he examined the brass candlestick, now carefully placed on a side table. "But one with rules, Hastings, and Hercule Poirot will discover them." He turned his attention to the crumpled paper bearing the second verse, smoothing it once more. "This poem, it is not mere decoration, it is a map, a guide to the mind of the murderer." The door creaked open, admitting Lady Eleanor, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot, the police have telephoned. The roads are flooded. They cannot arrive before evening. They ask that we preserve the scene and trust your judgment." Poirot inclined his head. "Bien. Then we shall proceed. Lady Eleanor, may I ask you to summon the guests once more? I wish to speak with them here, where the crime occurred." As Lady Eleanor departed, Hastings whispered, "You're not wasting time, are you? Think you'll catch the killer off guard?" Poirot's lips twitched. "The killer is already on guard, Hastings. But the mind, it betrays itself in small ways, a glance, a hesitation, a contradiction. We shall see." Within minutes, the guests reassembled, their faces a gallery of unease. Sir Reginald Thorne stood rigid, his cane tapping a slow rhythm. Clara Thorne hovered near him, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Dr. Malcolm Fraser leaned against a bookshelf, his clinical gaze scanning the room. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her scarlet dress now subdued by a shawl, sat dramatically on a divan, while Gerald Langley paced near the window, his eyes avoiding the covered body. Poirot stood before them, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture impeccable. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "a murder has been committed in this house, and the murderer is among us. Victor Crane was killed not by chance, but by design, and the poem left for us is no idle threat. I, Hercule Poirot, will ask questions, and I expect answers, truthful answers." Sir Reginald snorted. "This is absurd. You're no policeman, Poirot. Why should we submit to your interrogation?" "Because," Poirot said smoothly, "the police alibis reiterated, held firm but carried subtle shifts. Sir Reginald insisted he was in his room alone after Clara left at 7:30. Clara confirmed she was in the drawing room reading, though she admitted to stepping onto the terrace briefly for air. Dr. Fraser repeated his claim of a garden walk, adding that he saw no one else. Mrs. Langley, with a flourish, described her writing session, though she faltered when asked if Gerald was with her the entire time. Gerald, flustered, said he'd stepped out to fetch a cigarette case from his room at around 7:45. Poirot's eyes narrowed at this. "Monsieur Langley, your room is on the second floor near the library, oui? Did you pass this door?" Gerald swallowed. I didn't notice anything. The corridor was quiet." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured. He turned to the writing desk, where a pen lay askew, its nib stained with ink. "Monsieur Crane was a poet. Did he share his work with any of you?" Clara spoke softly. "He read a poem last night after dinner. It was strange, full of shadows and secrets. He said it was inspired by this house." "And did he speak of this cryptic poem we have found?" Poirot asked, holding up the second verse. The guests exchanged glances, but none admitted to prior knowledge. Dr. Fraser, however, leaned forward. Crane was a troubled man. His poetry often hinted at guilt, betrayal. Perhaps he knew something dangerous. Poirot's gaze lingered on the psychiatrist. Perhaps, doctor, or perhaps he was made to know too much. He moved to the scattered books, noting their titles. The collected works of Donne, Milton's Paradise Lost, the poems of Tennyson. These books were disturbed, yet only a few. Why these? And why leave the candlestick, so obvious a weapon? Mrs. Langley gasped. "You think the killer meant to leave it? As a clue?" "Everything is a clue, madame," Poirot said, "even that which seems careless." As the questioning continued, Hastings noticed Clara's handkerchief was now torn, her fingers working nervously at the fabric. Sir Reginald's tapping grew sharper, almost aggressive. Gerald Langley's pacing quickened, and Dr. Fraser's calm seemed almost too studied. Lady Eleanor, standing apart, watched them all with an expression Hastings couldn't quite read, fear or perhaps something deeper. Poirot concluded the session with a request for access to Crane's room and belongings. "I must understand the man who was killed," he said. "His life, his secrets, they will point to his death." As the guests dispersed, Poirot turned to Hastings. "What do you see, mon ami, in their words, their faces?" Hastings frowned. "They're all nervous, but who wouldn't be? Gerald seems shaky about his alibi, and Clara's a wreck. But that poem, it's chilling, Poirot. 3 more remain. Do you think more murders are coming?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The poem is a challenge, Hastings, but also a confession. The killer believes they are clever, but they have made a mistake already. The books, the candlestick, the timing, these are not random. We must look closer, and we must be swift." As they left the library, the rain intensified, sealing Ravenwood Hall in a cocoon of storm and suspicion. Hastings felt the weight of Poirot's words, sensing that the cryptic poem was only the beginning of a deadly riddle, one that only Poirot's little grey cells could unravel. Chapter 4. The Art of Observation. The rain continued its relentless assault on Ravenwood Hall, turning the grounds into a quagmire and trapping the guests within the stone walls of the estate. By mid-morning, the air inside was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of floorboards or the distant clatter of the servants' preparations. Captain Hastings followed Hercule Poirot up the grand staircase to Victor Crane's room, his mind buzzing with the morning's grim discoveries. The cryptic poem
with its ominous promise of 3 more secrets, seemed to hang over the house like a storm cloud. Poirot, as always, was unruffled, his polished shoes clicking softly on the polished oak floors. "Mon ami," he said, pausing at the door to Crane's room. "You must learn to see not only with your eyes but with your mind. The truth, it hides in the smallest details, the turn of a phrase, the placement of an object, the flicker of an eye." Hastings nodded, though he privately thought Poirot's penchant for cryptic pronouncements was as maddening as the poem itself. "I'll do my best, Poirot. But what are we looking for in Crane's room? Something to do with that wretched poem?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his green eyes gleaming. "Or perhaps something that tells us who Victor Crane was and why he was chosen as the first to fall." The room was modest but tidy, reflecting Crane's ascetic nature. A narrow bed stood against one wall, its covers neatly tucked. A small writing desk held a stack of papers, an inkwell, and a worn fountain pen. A single window overlooked the sodden gardens, its latch slightly ajar, letting in a damp breeze. Poirot moved with deliberate care, his gloved hands hovering over each item before selecting a notebook from the desk. He flipped through its pages, revealing fragments of poetry scrawled in Crane's jagged hand. "Listen, Hastings," Poirot said, reading aloud. "The raven's call, a truth untold, a heart of stone, a lie grown old. In halls of wealth, the past takes hold, and secrets burn where none are bold." Hastings frowned. "Sounds like more of his gloomy verse. Do you think it's connected to the murder poem?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Everything is connected, mon ami. This poem speaks of secrets, of a past that lingers. Victor Crane, he knew something
Noting a faint smudge of ink on the blotter. "Curious. The ink is fresh, yet the poem we found was written boldly, without hesitation. Did Crane write both, or did another hand mimic his?" Before Hastings could respond, Poirot moved to the wardrobe, where Crane's sparse belongings, a few suits, a scarf, a pair of worn shoes, revealed little. But beneath the bed, Poirot's keen eyes spotted a small leather-bound book, its cover embossed with the initials V.C. Inside were letters, some yellowed with age, addressed to Crane from various correspondents. One, dated only a week prior, caught Poirot's attention. It was unsigned, written in the same bold hand as the cryptic poem. "You cannot hide what you know. The truth will out, and the raven will sing." Poirot's expression grew grave. "This is no coincidence, Hastings. Someone threatened Monsieur Crane, and he kept this letter hidden. Why? Because he feared its author? Or because he planned to use it?" Their search was interrupted by a knock. Grayson, the butler, announced that the guests were gathered in the drawing room, as Poirot had requested. "Thank you, Grayson," Poirot said. "We shall join them shortly. One question. Did Monsieur Crane receive any visitors or letters in the days before his death?" Grayson hesitated. "A letter arrived 2 days ago, sir. I placed it in his room myself. He seemed agitated afterward." "Merci," Poirot said, dismissing the butler. To Hastings he added, "The net tightens, mon ami. Now, let us observe the living." In the drawing room, the guests sat in a strained semicircle, their faces a mix of apprehension and defiance. Lady Eleanor, composed but pale, offered tea, which was declined. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his hands clasped, his posture radiating calm authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "I have examined Monsieur Crane's room and found evidence that he was a man with secrets. A letter, a poem, a threat, all point to a truth he carried. I ask now, what did you know of Victor Crane? Speak freely, for the truth will not remain hidden."
Sir Reginald Thorne scoffed, his cane thumping the floor. Crane was a melancholic scribbler, always muttering about betrayal and guilt. If he had secrets, they were his own. Clara Thorne, her voice barely above a whisper, said, "He was kind to me once. He spoke of poetry as a way to unburden the soul, but he never shared his own burdens." Dr. Malcolm Fraser stroked his beard. As a psychiatrist, I found Crane fascinating. His poems hinted at a deep trauma, perhaps from his youth. He once mentioned a scandal long buried, but refused to elaborate.
Exaggerate. Crane was always theatrical, probably upset someone with his nonsense. Poirot's gaze lingered on Gerald. "And you, Monsieur Langley? Did you find his nonsense threatening?" Gerald flushed. "Of course not. I barely knew the man." Poirot nodded as if satisfied, but Hastings knew better. That slight tilt of the head meant Poirot had caught something, a tone, a glance, that warranted scrutiny. He turned to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, you invited Monsieur Crane. Why him, a poet of minor renown?" Lady Eleanor's hands tightened on her teacup. "My late husband admired his work. Victor visited Ravenwood years ago, before everything changed. I thought his presence would honor Charles's memory." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured. He produced the threatening letter from Crane's room, holding it up, but not revealing its contents. "This was found among Monsieur Crane's possessions, a warning, perhaps, or a challenge. Does anyone recognize the hand?" The room grew still. Clara's handkerchief fell to the floor, and she stooped quickly to retrieve it. Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed, and Dr. Fraser's calm faltered for a moment. Mrs. Langley gasped theatrically, while Gerald stared at the floor. "No?" Poirot said, folding the letter. "Then we shall continue. I ask that you remain in the house and make yourselves available. The truth, it is like a delicate thread. It will unravel, but only with care." As the guests dispersed, Hastings whispered, "You're stirring them up, Poirot. The letter, did you see their faces? Someone knows something." "Indeed, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low. "The letter is a key, but it is the poem that guides us. Crane's death was no accident, and the killer, they are watching. We must be precise, mon ami, for the next verse may bring another death." The storm outside roared louder, and Hastings felt the weight of Ravenwood Hall pressing in, its secrets as heavy as the rain-soaked stones. Chapter 5. The Obvious Suspect. The storm showed no sign of abating as the afternoon settled over Ravenwood Hall, its relentless drumming against the windows amplifying the sense of confinement. Captain Hastings, seated in the drawing room with a cup of tea gone cold, felt the weight of the morning's events pressing upon him. The murder of Victor Crane, the cryptic poem, and the threatening letter found in his room had cast a pall over the house, and the guests' strained civility only deepened the unease. Hercule Poirot, however, seemed invigorated, his green eyes alight with the challenge of the puzzle. "Mon ami," Poirot said, pacing before the fireplace with measured steps, "you are brooding again. This is not the time to come."
"Précisément," Poirot replied, his finger raised. "But boldness can be a mask. Let us see what the others reveal when pressed." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Grayson, the butler, his face drawn with fresh alarm. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, there's been a discovery. In the servants' quarters. You best come at once." Poirot's expression sharpened, and he followed Grayson without hesitation, Hastings trailing behind. They descended a narrow staircase to the lower level of the house, where the air was damp and the light dim. In a small storeroom, a housemaid stood trembling, pointing to a wooden crate tucked behind a stack of linens. On the crate, scrawled in chalk, were the words, "The raven knows." Inside the crate, hastily concealed beneath a cloth, lay a blood-stained scarf, its fabric fine, embroidered with the initials G.L. Hastings' breath caught. "Good Lord, Poirot, that's Gerald Langley's scarf, and the blood." Poirot examined the scarf without touching it, his eyes narrowing. "The blood is dry, but not old. This was placed here recently, perhaps this morning. And the initials, most convenient, no?" "Convenient?" Hastings exclaimed. "It's damning. Gerald was evasive about his alibi, said he was fetching a cigarette case near the library. He could have killed Crane and hidden this to cover his tracks." Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. "You leap to conclusions, Hastings, like a hound after a fox. But the fox, he is cleverer than that. Why leave such an obvious clue? Let us speak with Monsieur Langley." Gerald Langley was summoned to the drawing room, where the other guests had gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Gerald's usual distraction had given way to a pallor that made his freckles stand out starkly. Poirot held the scarf aloft, its crimson-stained stock against the cream silk. "Monsieur Langley," Poirot said, his voice calm but piercing, "this was found in the servants' quarters, hidden in a crate. It bears your initials and the blood of a man who was murdered this morning. Can you explain?" Gerald's jaw dropped, his eyes darting to his wife Beatrice, who gasped theatrically. "That's preposterous," he stammered. I lost that scarf days ago. Anyone could have taken it." "Days ago?" Poirot repeated, his tone deceptively mild. "And yet it appears now, with blood that is fresh. Tell me, Monsieur Langley, where were you precisely between 7 and 8 this morning?" "I told you," Gerald said, his voice rising. "I was with Beatrice. Then I went to my room for my cigarette case. I didn't go near the library." Beatrice clutched his arm. "He's telling the truth, Monsieur Poirot. Gerald was with me until at least 10 minutes to 8. He couldn't have done—"
"Basis of a scarf. Anyone could have planted it." "Indeed," Poirot said, his gaze sweeping the room. "Anyone with access to Monsieur Langley's belongings. Tell me, who among you noticed this scarf before today?" Clara Thorne, pale and silent until now, spoke softly. I saw it yesterday, in the hall. Gerald was wearing it at dinner. He must have left it there." Gerald rounded on her. "That's a lie! I haven't worn that scarf since we arrived." Clara flinched, and her father stepped forward, his face thunderous. "Mind your tone, Langley. My daughter doesn't lie." Dr. Malcolm Fraser cleared his throat. "If I may, Monsieur Poirot, this scarf could be a deliberate misdirection. In my professional opinion, the killer may be exploiting Gerald's nervous disposition to cast suspicion." Poirot nodded, as if considering this, but Hastings caught the glint in his eye. "A misdirection, Doctor? Perhaps. But the blood, it is real, and the scarf was hidden with care. I ask again, has anyone seen anything unusual today?" Lady Eleanor, standing near the window, spoke hesitantly. I saw Gerald in the corridor near the library this morning, just before 8. He seemed in a hurry." Gerald's face reddened. "I was fetching my cigarette case, as I said. I didn't go into the library." Poirot folded the scarf carefully. "Merci, Lady Eleanor. This scarf will remain in my care until the police arrive. I urge you all to reflect on what you have seen or heard. The truth, it is like a mirror. It reflects only what is placed before it." As the guests dispersed, muttering among themselves, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, it looks bad for Gerald. The scarf, his shaky alibi, and now Lady Eleanor's testimony." Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, Hastings. The scarf is too perfect, too obvious. The killer wishes us to chase this trail, to see only the fox and not the trap. But Hercule Poirot, he does not chase. He thinks. They returned to the library where Poirot examined the crate's chalk inscription again. "The raven knows," he murmured. "This phrase, it echoes the poem. The killer is weaving a story, Hastings, but they have made a mistake. The scarf was hidden, yes, but not destroyed. Why? Because it serves a purpose." Hastings frowned. "To frame Gerald?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, "or to distract us from another truth. We must look beyond the obvious, to the shadows where the real motive lies." As the rain battered Ravenwood Hall, Hastings felt a growing dread. The scarf had pointed a finger at Gerald Langley, but Poirot's words suggested a deeper game. The cryptic poem's warning
Stood by a window in the drawing room.
watching, system, watching. The droplets traced their paths down the glass, his mind heavy with the weight of Victor Crane's murder and the blood-stained scarf that pointed an accusing finger at Gerald Langley. The cryptic poem, with its chilling promise of further secrets and deaths, seemed to whisper through the creaks of the old house, urging caution and haste in equal measure. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere, had retreated to a small parlor to consult the little grey cells, as he put it. Hastings knew this meant hours of silent reflection, punctuated by the occasional sip of tisane and a twitch of his meticulously groomed moustache. But Poirot emerged sooner than expected, his eyes bright with the spark of discovery. "Mon ami," he said, finding Hastings by the window, "I have found a discrepancy, a small crack in the facade of this crime. Come, we must return to the library." Hastings followed, his curiosity piqued. "Come we here, both to lie alive," but the scattered books and the brass candlestick remained, silent witnesses to the morning's violence. Poirot moved to the writing desk, his gloved fingers hovering over the ink-stained blotter. "Hastings," he began, his voice precise and measured. "The poem, the scarf, the alibis, they are pieces of a puzzle, but one piece does not fit. The time of death, it is not as it seems." Hastings frowned. "Dr. Fraser said Crane died between 7 and 8, from a single blow. Lady Eleanor found him just before 8. What's amiss?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint knowing smile. "Précisément, the doctor's assessment. But observe this." He pointed to the ink blotter on the desk, where a faint smudge formed an irregular pattern. "This ink is fresh, as I noted earlier, but I have examined it closely. It is not from a single stroke of the pen. There are two distinct smudges, one fresher than the other, as if the pen was used twice, hours apart." Hastings blinked, struggling to follow. "You mean Crane wrote something earlier, then later?" No, Poirot said, his finger raised for emphasis. "The first smudge, it is older, perhaps from last night, when Crane was writing his poetry. The second, it is fresher from this morning. But here is the inconsistency. The poem we found, its ink matches the fresher smudge, yet it was crumpled and discarded, as if written in haste. Why would Crane write such a poem, then cast it aside? And why does the blood on the rug, though wet when found, show signs of drying at the edges, suggesting a slightly earlier time of death?" Hastings' eyes widened. "You're saying the murder happened earlier than we thought?" Poirot nodded. "Blood's drying pattern, the body's stiffness, these do not align perfectly with Dr. Fraser's timeline, and the scarf, so conveniently placed, it distracts from this discrepancy." "But why would Dr. Fraser lie?" Hastings asked, his mind racing. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Perhaps he did not lie, but erred. Or perhaps he had reason to obscure the truth. Let us test this. I shall speak with him privately." Poirot requested Dr. Malcolm Fraser join them in the parlour, a smaller room adjacent to the library, its walls lined with faded tapestries. Fraser entered, his bearded face composed, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of wariness. Poirot offered him a seat, his demeanour courteous but probing. "Dr. Fraser," Poirot began, "your expertise as a psychiatrist is noted, but your medical judgment interests me now. You stated Victor Crane died between 7 and 8 this morning, yet I observe signs, blood drying, early rigor, that suggest death occurred closer to 6:30. Can you explain this?" Fraser's hand paused, mid-stroke on his beard. I examined the body briefly. My estimate was based on the blood's appearance and body temperature. I could have been mistaken by half an hour. "Half an hour," Poirot repeated, his tone deceptively mild. "In a murder, such a time is critical. Tell me, doctor, were you indeed in the garden from 6:30 to 7:30, as you claimed?" Fraser's calm faltered, his fingers tightening on the armrest. "Yes, I was walking. The fresh air clears my mind." "Alone?" Poirot pressed. "No one saw you? No one can confirm?" "I prefer solitude in the morning," Fraser replied, his voice steady but his eyes avoiding Poirot's. "I saw no one." Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but Hastings recognized the glint in his friend's eye, a sign he had caught a scent. "Merci, doctor. You may go, but reflect, if you please, on the precision of time. It is a small thing, but in murder, nothing is small." As Fraser left, Hastings whispered, "You think he's hiding something, don't you? That time discrepancy, it throws off all the alibis." "Exactement," Poirot said, his voice low. "If Crane died at 6:30, then Gerald Langley's trip to fetch his cigarette case at 7:45 is irrelevant. But so too are the alibis of others, Sir Reginald in his room, Clara on the terrace, Beatrice writing, and Dr. Fraser alone in the garden. One of them, or more, is not where they claim." Hastings shivered, the poem's words echoing in his mind. 3 more remain, their secrets.
The storm's roar seemed to echo the growing tension within Ravenwood Hall. The discrepancy in time had cracked open the case, revealing that the truth was not as it appeared, and that the killer's plan was far from complete. Chapter 7. Secrets Beneath the Surface. The storm had not relented as evening descended upon Ravenwood Hall, its relentless rain casting a veil of gloom over the ancient estate. The flickering candlelight in the dining room did little to dispel the tension that clung to the air like damp mist. Captain Hastings, seated at the long mahogany table, observed the guests with growing unease. The discovery of the time discrepancy in Victor Crane's death had shifted the atmosphere, and the cryptic poem's warning of 3 more secrets loomed over them all. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his black dinner jacket, seemed the only one unperturbed, his green eyes scanning the room with the precision of a jeweler examining a flawed gem. Dinner was a strained affair, the clink of cutlery and the murmur of forced pleasantries punctuating the silence. Lady Eleanor, at the head of the table, made a valiant effort to maintain decorum, but her hands trembled as she poured wine. Sir Reginald Thorne sat rigidly, his cane propped against his chair, while Clara Thorne picked at her food, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Malcolm Fraser maintained his clinical calm, though his gaze lingered on Poirot. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, subdued for once, whispered to her husband, Gerald, whose pallor had not improved since the discovery of his blood-stained scarf. Poirot, sipping his soup with maddening deliberation, broke the silence.
Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. The death of Monsieur Victor Crane is a puzzle, and puzzles are solved by understanding the human heart. I have learned that the time of his death was earlier than first thought, between 6:30 and 7 this morning. This changes your alibis, does it not? The room stilled. Sir Reginald's spoon clattered against his bowl. What are you implying, Poirot? That we're all liars? Not all, Poirot replied smoothly, but someone. Secrets, they are like shadows. They follow you even when you think they are hidden. Who among you knew Monsieur Crane before this weekend? Speak now, for the truth will not remain silent. A heavy pause followed. Then, to Hastings' surprise, Clara Thorne spoke, her voice trembling but clear. I knew Victor years ago. Before he was a poet, he worked as a clerk in London. We met at a literary salon my father hosted. He was different then, kinder. But he changed after a scandal. Sir Reginald's face darkened. Clara, hold your tongue. That was your...
For a client. He was dismissed, but the matter was hushed up. Father helped him, gave him money to start anew. Victor never forgot it, but he resented it too. Sir Reginald banged his cane on the floor. Enough! I did the man a favor, and he repaid me with sullen verses. That's no motive for murder. Poirot turned to Lady Eleanor. Madame, you said your late husband admired Crane's work. Was this scandal known to him? Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. Charles knew many things. He was a collector of secrets, you might say. He supported Victor's poetry to give him a fresh start, but I don't know the details. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, unable to resist, leaned forward. Oh, but I know something. Victor told me last night he was writing a new poem, one that would expose the rot in this house. He said it was about a betrayal from years ago, something to do with money and love. Gerald gripped his wife's arm. Beatrice, for God's sake, stop spinning tales. You'll make things worse. Worse for whom, Monsieur Langley? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. You have been most anxious since the discovery of your scarf. Is there something you wish to confess? Gerald's face flushed. I've told you I didn't kill him, but all right, I'll say it. Crane approached me yesterday, said he knew something about my business dealings, something that could ruin me. He wanted money to keep quiet. The room gasped. Beatrice stared at her husband, her eyes wide. Gerald, you never told me. Because it wasn't true, Gerald snapped. He was bluffing, trying to extort me. I told him to go to blazes. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Fraser, who had remained silent. And you, Doctor? You spoke of Crane's trauma, his hints of a scandal. Did he confide in you? Fraser stroked his beard, his composure intact. He spoke in generalities, as patients often do. He mentioned a betrayal, yes, but nothing specific. I advised him to let go of the past, but he was obsessed. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, each of you carries a piece of the truth, but some pieces are sharper than others. Monsieur Crane was a man who stirred old wounds, and one of you could not bear it. As dinner concluded, Poirot requested a private word with Hastings in the parlour. The small room was lit by a single lamp, casting long shadows across the tapestries. Poirot paced, his hands clasped behind his back. Hastings, he said, the lies, they multiply. Clara's revelation of the scandal, Gerald's confession of blackmail, these are threads in the tapestry. But the poem, it is the needle that someone here, a secret worth killing for. But we must be cautious.
For the killer is watching, and the next verse may bring another blow. Hastings shivered, recalling the poem's chilling words. 3 more remain, their secrets to keep. Do you think Gerald's telling the truth about the blackmail? Poirot's eyes gleamed. He tells part of the truth, mon ami, but not all. His scarf, the timing, the scandal, they point to a pattern, but not the whole picture. We must dig deeper, into the shadows of Ravenwood's past. As they stepped into the corridor, a distant crash of thunder echoed, and the lights flickered briefly. Ravenwood Hall seemed to pulse with secrets, and Hastings felt the weight of an unseen menace drawing closer, guided by the cryptic poem's deadly rhythm. The evening at Ravenwood Hall had grown oppressive, the storm's ceaseless roar mingling with the undercurrent of fear that now permeated the house. The dining room had emptied, the guests retreating to their rooms or the drawing room, their faces etched with suspicion and dread. Captain Hastings, lingering in the corridor, felt the weight of the revelations at dinner, Clara's mention of a scandal, Gerald's admission of blackmail, pressing upon him like the damp air. The cryptic poem's warning, 3 more remain, their secrets to keep, echoed in his mind, a sinister promise of further unraveling. Hercule Poirot, ever the calm centre of the storm, had requested a private audience with Clara Thorne in the small parlour, sensing her nervous demeanour held more than she had yet revealed. Hastings followed, his role as Poirot's confidant and observer now second nature. The parlour, with its faded tapestries and single flickering lamp, felt like a confessional, its shadows deepening the air of intimacy and tension. Clara entered, her pale face framed by dark curls, her hands twisting the tattered remnants of a handkerchief. She sat stiffly, her eyes avoiding Poirot's piercing gaze. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "you wanted to see me?" "Oui, Mademoiselle Thorne," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm, like a doctor probing a wound. "You spoke at dinner of a scandal involving Monsieur Victor Crane, a matter from years ago. I sense there is more you have not said. The truth, it weighs upon you, does it not?" Clara's lips trembled, and for a moment, Hastings thought she might bolt from the room, but then her shoulders sagged, and her eyes filled with tears. I didn't tell the whole truth," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Victor wasn't just a clerk I met at father's salon. We were close for a time. I was young, foolish. I thought I loved him." Hastings' eyebrows shot up, but Poirot remained impassive, his hands clasped neatly before him. "Continue, mademoiselle," he urged. "What happened between you and Monsieur Crane?"
Took a shuddering breath.
Father found out. He was furious, said Victor was beneath me, a nobody with no prospects. Then the scandal broke. Victor was accused of forging documents for a client, a wealthy man who lost a fortune. Father used his influence to hush it up, paid Victor to leave London. I thought it was to protect me, but Victor told me years later that Father had a hand in the scandal. He said Father set him up to ruin him, to keep us apart. Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his expression remained serene. "And you believed him?" "I didn't know what to believe," Clara said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Victor was so bitter when he came here. Last night, after his poem, he cornered me in the hall. He said he'd written something new, something that would expose Father's part in the scandal and other secrets about Ravenwood. He asked me to run away with him, to start over. I refused. I couldn't betray Father, not after everything." Hastings felt a pang of sympathy for the young woman, her voice raw with guilt and sorrow. But Poirot's focus was unrelenting. "This new poem, mademoiselle, did he show it to you?" Clara shook her head. "No, but he said it was hidden, somewhere safe. He was afraid, Monsieur Poirot. He said someone in this house would kill to keep the past buried." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but commanding. "And did you tell anyone of this conversation? Your father, perhaps?" "No."
Clara's voice rose, then broke.
I couldn't. Father would have been furious, but I think someone overheard us. I heard footsteps in the corridor after Victor left. I didn't see who it was.
Poirot sat back, his fingers tapping lightly against his knee.
Merci, Mademoiselle Thorme. You have been most helpful. You may go, but reflect, if you please, on those footsteps. They may hold the key to this tragedy.
As Clara fled the room, her sobs echoing faintly, Hastings turned to Poirot.
Good Lord, Poirot, that's a bombshell. Sir Reginald setting up Crane to ruin him, and Clara caught in the middle. It's motive enough for murder.
Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile.
Motive, oui, but not proof, Hastings. Mademoiselle Clara has given us a piece of the truth, but it is a fragile piece, clouded by emotion. The poem she speaks of, the one Crane hid, it is another thread in this tapestry. We must find it.
Hastings frowned.
But those footsteps she mentioned, someone else knows about her and Crane. Could it be the killer?
Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Or perhaps it is another player in this game, watching, waiting. The scandal, the blackmail, the love affair. These are the shadows of Ravenwood's past.
Closely, for one of them heard more than they admit. As they stepped into the corridor, the storm's fury seemed to mirror the turmoil within Ravenwood Hall. Clara's confession had cracked open a wound, exposing a tangle of betrayal and hidden love. But the cryptic poem's promise of further secrets loomed, and Hastings felt a chill, sensing that the killer was not yet done weaving their deadly riddle. Chapter 9. The Trap is Set. The storm had settled into a brooding drizzle by the following morning, its gray veil softening the harsh outlines of Ravenwood Hall, but doing little to ease the tension within. Captain Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, felt the weight of the past day's revelations. Clara's confession of her youthful love for Victor Crane, the hinted scandal involving Sir Reginald, and Gerald Langley's admission of blackmail. The cryptic poem, with its ominous promise of 3 more secrets, seemed to pulse through the house like a heartbeat, each verse drawing them closer to an unseen truth. Hercule Poirot, impeccable as ever in his neatly pressed suit, entered the room with an air of quiet purpose. His green eyes gleamed with the intensity of a man who had spent the night consulting his little gray cells. Hastings knew that look. It meant Poirot was ready to act. "Mon ami," Poirot said, adjusting his mustache. "The time for observation is past. Now we must apply pressure, like the jeweler who cuts the stone to reveal its heart. The killer is among us, watching. Perhaps growing careless. We shall set a trap." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "A trap? What sort, Poirot? You're not planning to stage another murder, I hope." Poirot's lips twitched. Non, Hastings. The trap is psychological. The killer believes they control the game, with their poem and their clues. But Hercule Poirot, he changes the rules. Come, we shall gather the guests." Poirot instructed Grayson to summon everyone to the library, the scene of Victor Crane's murder. The room, though tidied since the crime, still carried an air of unease, the covered rug and scattered books a silent reminder of violence. The guests filed in, their faces a gallery of apprehension. Lady Eleanor, composed but pale. Sir Reginald, gripping his cane with barely concealed irritation. Clara, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, his clinical calm strained. And Beatrice, and Gerald Langley, the former subdued, the latter visibly nervous. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small figure commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate. "The murder of Monsieur Victor Crane is a puzzle, but not an unsolvable one. I have learned much of scandals, of blackmail, of hidden love. But one truth remains elusive.
Is the poem Monsieur Crane wrote the one he claimed would expose the rot in Ravenwood Hall? Mademoiselle Clara tells me it was hidden, a secret he guarded. I have found it, and its words point to the murderer. A ripple of tension passed through the room. Gerald Langley's hands clenched, and Beatrice gasped softly. Clara's eyes widened, while Sir Reginald's face darkened. Dr. Fraser leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the paper. Hastings, who knew no such poem had been found, suppressed a start of surprise. Poirot's bluff was bold, and he could only hope it would work. The poem, Poirot continued, names a secret so dangerous that Crane was killed to silence it. But the killer made a mistake. They left traces, inconsistencies. The time of death, the blood-stained scarf, the ink on the desk, these are not accidents. And now, this poem will reveal the final truth. I ask, does anyone wish to speak before I read it aloud? The silence was heavy, broken only by the patter of rain. Then, to Hastings' astonishment, Beatrice Langley rose, a scarlet shawl slipping from her shoulders.
Monsieur Poirot,
She said, a voice trembling but resolute.
You don't need to read it. I know what Victor was going to expose. It was about me.
The room froze. Gerald stared at his wife, his face ashen. Beatrice, what are you saying? Beatrice's eyes glistened with tears.
Victor knew something about my past, something I've kept hidden for years. Before we married Gerald, I was involved with a man, a gambler. He blackmailed me, threatened to ruin my career as a novelist. Victor found out somehow, and he was going to use it in his poem. He told me last night, after dinner. He said it would set him free, to expose it.
Poirot's gaze was unyielding. And did you confront him, Madame Langley? Did you go to the library this morning?
No!
Beatrice cried, her hands twisting together.
I was angry, yes, but I didn't kill him. I was in my room, writing, as I said. But I saw someone near the library just before 7. I couldn't see who, it was dark, and they moved quickly.
Gerald reached for her, his voice hoarse. Beatrice, why didn't you tell me?
Because I was ashamed,
She sobbed.
and I thought if I stayed silent it would all go away.
Poirot folded the paper, which Hastings now knew was blank, and slipped it into his pocket. Merci, Madame Langley. Your candor is noted. But I must ask, who else knew of this secret? Beatrice shook her head.
No one, I swear. Only Victor, and now whoever killed him.
Sir Reginald snorted. This is nonsense.
Is clever, but not cleverer than Hercule Poirot. As the guests dispersed, their whispers tinged with unease, Hastings turned to Poirot. That was a brilliant bluff, Poirot. Beatrice cracked, but do you think she's telling the truth? Poirot's eyes gleamed. She tells a truth, Hastings, but not the whole truth. Her secret gives her motive, but her sighting near the library, it shifts the focus. Someone else was there, and they are nervous now. The trap it has sprung, but the prey is not yet caught. Hastings glanced at the rain-streaked windows, feeling the weight of Ravenwood's secrets pressing closer. The poem's shadow loomed, and Poirot's gambit had set the stage for a reckoning. But the killer remained hidden, watching from the darkness. This chapter fulfills the prompt's requirement for Poirot to set a trap by applying psychological pressure, using a fabricated poem to provoke Beatrice Langley into revealing a partial truth about her past. The narrative, through Hastings' third-person limited-person figment, maintains the elegant, suspenseful tone of an Agatha Christie novel.
deepening the mystery with new motives and a mysterious sighting. Please say, continue with Chapter 10, to proceed with Poirot's step-by-step breakdown of the crime in the dramatic reveal. Chapter 10. The Unveiling of Truth. The storm had finally begun to wane, leaving Ravenwood Hall cloaked in a damp, uneasy calm. The library, where Victor Crane had met his end, was once again the stage for a gathering. But this time, the air crackled with anticipation. Captain Hastings stood near the fireplace, his heart pounding as he watched Hercule Poirot prepare to address the assembled guests. The cryptic poem, the blood-stained scarf, the time discrepancy, and the revelations of scandal and blackmail had woven a complex tapestry of deceit, and Poirot's gleaming eyes signaled that he was ready to unravel it. The guests sat in a tense semicircle. Lady Eleanor, her hands clasped tightly. Sir Reginald Thorne, his cane gripped like a weapon. Clara Thorne, pale and trembling. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, his clinical calm fraying. And Beatrice and Gerald Langley, the former subdued, the latter fidgeting nervously. The butler Grayson stood by the door, his face impassive, but his eyes alert. Poirot stood before the hearth, his small figure radiating authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and commanding. "A murder has been committed in this house, and the killer sits among us." Victor Crane was struck down, not by chance, but by a calculated hand, guided by a secret he threatened to expose.
Pattern and early rigor confirmed this, revealing a discrepancy in Dr. Fraser's initial estimate. This small error shifted the alibis, casting doubt on all. Dr. Fraser shifted in his seat, but Poirot continued. The weapon, a brass candlestick, was left in plain sight, too obvious perhaps. Then there was the blood-stained scarf, bearing Monsieur Langley's initials, hidden in the servants' quarters. A clear accusation, yet too convenient. Why hide it, yet not destroy it? Because it was a distraction, meant to point us to Gerald Langley. Gerald's face reddened. "I told you I didn't do it. That scarf was stolen." "Précisément," Poirot said. "The scarf was placed to mislead, but it tells us something else. The killer had access to your belongings. Now, let us consider the poem, the heart of this mystery." He produced the 2 verses, reading them aloud. "In Ravenwood's heart, where shadows creep, a secret lies buried deep. 4 lines to guide, 4 truths to know, but 1 false step, and death shall grow. 1 truth is gone, the first to fall, a whispered lie in Ravenwood's hall. 3 more remain, their secrets to keep, but tread with care, for death runs deep." The poem, Poirot said, is a taunt, a challenge. It speaks of 4 truths, one of which is gone, Victor Crane. But what was his truth? Mademoiselle Clara revealed a scandal from years ago, where Crane was accused of forgery, a matter hushed up by Sir Reginald. Monsieur Langley spoke of blackmail, claiming Crane threatened to expose his business dealings. Madame Langley admitted a past indiscretion, which Crane knew. And Lady Eleanor, you spoke of your husband's support for Crane, a man who collected secrets. Poirot's gaze swept the room. But there is another thread, the poem Crane wrote, the one he claimed would expose the rot in Ravenwood. Mademoiselle Cara said it was hidden, and last night I found it, tucked inside the binding
of the collected works of Donne on the library shelf. He produced a small paper, its edges worn, and read, "The Raven's Call, a truth untold, a heart of stone, a lie grown old. In halls of wealth the past takes hold, and secrets burn where none are bold." This poem, Poirot said, points to a betrayal, a lie from the past. Crane was no forger, he was framed, and the true culprit was among us. The killer feared this exposure and struck to silence him, so Reginald banged after her talk with Crane.
Someone overheard their conversation about the scandal and the hidden poem. That someone acted swiftly, before dawn, to kill Crane and stage the scene. Poirot turned to Dr. Fraser. "Doctor, your alibi was a solitary walk in the garden, unseen by anyone. Yet you misjudged the time of death, perhaps deliberately, to obscure the truth. And you, a psychiatrist, knew Crane's mind, his obsession with the past, his talk of betrayal. You were in a position to know his secrets." Fraser's face paled. I made an honest mistake. I'm no killer." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, you have been silent, but your husband's connection to Crane is key. He supported Crane after the scandal, but why? Because he knew the truth, that Crane was innocent, framed by another. And you knew this secret too." Lady Eleanor's hands trembled. "Charles, you wanted to help Victor, to atone for what happened." "Exactement," Poirot said. "The scandal was not just about forgery. It was about a betrayal within Ravenwood's walls. Sir Reginald, you orchestrated Crane's ruin to keep him from Clara. But there was more. A financial scheme. A theft masked as forgery, in which you profited. Crane discovered this years later and came here to expose you. You overheard his talk with Clara, and you acted." Sir Reginald's face contorted. "You have no proof, Poirot. This is slander." "Proof," Poirot said, his voice rising. "The ink on your cuff, Sir Reginald, from the pen you used to write the second verse, mimicking Crane's hand. The footsteps Clara heard, your cane, which you cannot move without, and the scarf, taken from Gerald's room to cast suspicion. You killed Victor Crane to bury the past. But the past, it does not stay buried." The room erupted in gasps. Clara sobbed. And Sir Reginald rose, his cane shaking. "You're mad. I won't stand for this." But Poirot's voice was relentless. "You struck Crane at 6:30, before the house stirred. You wrote the poem to confuse, to suggest a larger scheme. But Hercule Poirot sees through the deception. You are the killer." Sir Reginald's face crumpled, and he sank back into his chair, his silence a confession. The room was still, the truth laid bare. Poirot 0, Chapter 11. The Quiet Reflection. The storm had passed, leaving Ravenwood Hall bathed in the pale light of a late morning sun. The air felt cleansed, but the weight of the previous night's revelations lingered like a faint mist. Captain Hastings stood in the library, where the drama of Hercule Poirot's accusation had unfolded only hours before. Sir Reginald shattered the fragile civility of their gathering. Hercule Poirot stood by the library window, his small figure silhouetted against the glass, his hands clasped behind his back. His face, usually so composed, bore a trace of melancholy, as if the solving of the crime had left him both satisfied and burdened. Hastings approached, his footsteps soft on the Persian rug, still faintly stained despite the servant's efforts. "Well, Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "you've done it again. Sir Reginald, good Lord, I never would have guessed. The way you pieced it together, the ink, the cane, the poem, it was brilliant." Poirot turned,
his green eyes meeting Hastings with a faint smile. Brilliant, perhaps, mon ami, but also necessary. The truth, it is like a wound. It must be exposed to heal, though the process is painful. Sir Reginald believed he could bury the past, but the past, it has a way of rising. Hastings nodded, settling into a chair. Still, it's a grim business. Clara's heartbroken, and poor Lady Eleanor, she must feel betrayed, hosting a murder under her roof. And that poem, Poirot, it gave me chills. Was it really just Sir Reginald's invention to throw us off? Poirot's fingers tapped lightly against his sleeve. The poem, Hastings, was both a taunt and a confession. Sir Reginald used it to create confusion, to suggest a larger scheme, but it betrayed his own mind. The four truths, the secrets to keep, these were his fears, his knowledge of Crane's discovery. He wrote it to mislead, but in doing so, he revealed himself. The ink on his cuff, the rhythm of his cane, these were the threads I followed. Hastings shook his head, marveling. You saw what none of us did. But why, Poirot? Why do people like Sir Reginald kill to protect their secrets? Poirot's expression grew somber. The human heart, mon ami, it is a complex thing. Sir Reginald acted not only to protect his wealth, his reputation, but also his control over Clara. His love for her, it was possessive, twisted. When Crane threatened to expose the old scandal, the theft masked as forgery, in which Sir Reginald profited, he saw not only ruin, but the loss of his daughter's loyalty. Murder to him was the lesser sin. Hastings shivered, the weight of Poirot's words settling over him. And the others, Gerald, Beatrice, Dr. Fraser, they all had secrets too. Oui, Poirot said, his voice softening. Each carried a burden. Gerald's fear of blackmail, Beatrice's shame, Fraser's professional curiosity. Even Lady Eleanor, with her husband's legacy of secrets, but only one turned to murder. The others they will heal in time, for the truth sets free those who embrace it. He moved to the writing desk, where the cryptic poem.
They can outwit justice, but the little grey cells, they see the order beneath the lies. Always, the truth leaves a trace. Hastings smiled faintly. You make it sound so simple, Poirot. But I'll never understand how you do it, seeing what's right in front of us, yet invisible. Poirot's eyes twinkled. It is not magic, mon ami, but method, observation, logic, psychology. These are the tools of Hercule Poirot, and a touch of patience, perhaps. He adjusted his tie with precision, as if restoring order to the world. Now we shall leave Ravenwood Hall to its healing. The police will take Sir Reginald, and we return to our quiet lives until the next puzzle calls. As they stepped into the corridor, Grayson approached with news of the police's arrival. Poirot nodded, his work complete. Hastings followed him to the grand entrance, where their coats awaited. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the estate, and for a moment Ravenwood Hall seemed to breathe again, freed from the shadow of its secrets. Poirot paused at the door, glancing back. Adieu, Ravenwood, he murmured. May your truths now rest in peace. With that, he stepped into the waiting car, Hastings at his side, leaving behind a house forever changed by the piercing light of his little grey cells. Chapter 12. Echoes of the Past. The police had come and gone from Ravenwood Hall, their motor cars leaving deep ruts in the now muddy drive, as they took Sir Reginald Thorne into custody. The sun, breaking through the remnants of the storm, cast a fragile light over the estate, but the air within remained heavy with the aftermath of betrayal and murder. Captain Hastings, packing his valise in the guest room, felt a lingering unease, as if the cryptic poem's shadow still clung to the walls. Victor Crane's death had been explained. Sir Reginald's guilt laid bare, yet something nagged at him, a sense that the story was not fully told. Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, was already dressed for departure, his hat and gloves immaculate, as he stood in the corridor, inspecting a portrait of a stern-faced Worthington ancestor. "Mon ami," he said as Hastings approached, "you are troubled. You pack with the haste of a man fleeing a ghost. What is it that unsettles you?" Hastings hesitated, setting his valise down. "I don't know, Poirot. You solved the case. Sir Reginald, the scandal, the poem, it all fits. But that second verse, 3 more remain. It feels unfinished. What if there's more to this than we've seen?" Poirot's green eyes twinkled with a knowing glint. "You are learning, Hastings, to sense the undercurrents. The poem, it was Sir Reginald's creation, yes, to mislead us. But you
Now seemed almost ordinary. The rug replaced, and the books neatly reshelved. Poirot moved to the writing desk, his fingers tracing the edge where the ink smudges had first caught his attention. "The poem was the key," he murmured. "But there is another clue, one we have overlooked. The letter, Hastings. The threatening letter found in Crane's room." Hastings frowned. "The one that said, 'The raven will sing'? You said it was from Sir Reginald, to scare Crane into silence." "Oui," Poirot said. "But I have reconsidered. The letter's hand was bold, like the poem. But its tone was different, less poetic, more direct. And it was written before the murder, delivered 2 days ago. Sir Reginald. He's methodical, but would he risk such a letter when he planned to act so soon?" Before Hastings could respond, Lady Eleanor appeared at the door, her silver hair catching the sunlight. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice steady but tinged with weariness. "I heard you were leaving. I wanted to thank you, and to ask if there's anything more I should know." Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone remained precise. "Madame, your hospitality has been exemplary, even in tragedy. But tell me, this letter." He produced the crumpled note from Crane's room, its words stark. "You cannot hide what you know. The truth will out, and the raven will sing." "Did your late husband, Lord Worthington, ever speak of Crane's past beyond the scandal?" Lady Eleanor's hands tightened on her shawl. "Charles, he was a complex man. He supported Victor's poetry, yes, but he also kept records, letters, documents, about many people, including those involved in the scandal. He said it was to protect them, but I always suspected he held those secrets as leverage." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And where are these records now, madame?" "In the study," she replied, "locked in his old desk. I've not touched them since his death." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "With your permission, Lady Eleanor, we shall examine them." The study was a small oak-paneled room, its air thick with the scent of old leather and dust. Lady Eleanor unlocked the desk, revealing a drawer filled with neatly bundled letters and ledgers. Poirot sifted through them with care, his gloved hands pausing on a yellowed envelope marked with the initials V.C. Inside was a single sheet, written in a different hand, not Crane's, not Sir Reginald's, but a precise, feminine script. Poirot read aloud. "Victor, your silence is your salvation. Speak of the theft, and you will regret it. E.W." Hastings gasped. "E.W.? Eleanor Worthington? Lady Eleanor, you wrote this?"
refused to expose it, for Clara's sake and to avoid a public feud. I wrote to Victor, urging him to stay silent to protect us all. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable.
"And when Victor returned, threatening to expose the truth in his poem, you feared the consequences, not just for Sir Reginald, but for your husband's legacy."
I did, she said softly. But I didn't Kill him, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it.
I believe you, madame, Poirot said. Your letter was a warning, not a threat of violence. But it confirms the depth of the secret Crane carried, a secret worth killing for. Sir Reginald acted to protect himself, but your letter, it was the spark that set him in motion.
Hastings shook his head, bewildered. So the poem's 3 more, it was just a bluff? Or is there still danger? Poirot's lips curved faintly.
The poem was Sir Reginald's deception, but the secrets of Ravenwood, they are real. They will not lead to more deaths, I think, for the truth is now free. But they remind us, Hastings, that the past is never truly buried.
As they prepared to leave, Lady Eleanor touched Poirot's arm. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You've saved this house from further ruin. Poirot inclined his head.
It is my duty, madame, to bring order from chaos. Adieu.
Outside, the car awaited, its engine humming softly. Hastings glanced back at Ravenwood Hall, its stone facade glowing in the sunlight. The echoes of its secrets would linger, but Poirot's work was done. Chapter 13. The Unseen Shadow. The sun hung low over Ravenwood Hall, its golden rays casting long shadows across the Devon countryside, as Captain Hastings and Hercule Poirot prepared to depart. The air was crisp, cleansed by the storm's passing, but a lingering disquiet clung to Hastings, as if the house still whispered secrets not fully laid to rest. Sir Reginald Thorne's confession, Lady Eleanor's revelation about her warning letter to Victor Crane, and the cryptic poem's taunting verses had resolved the murder. Yet Hastings couldn't shake the feeling that a final piece of the puzzle remained just out of reach. Poirot, adjusting his hat with his usual precision, seemed less troubled, his green eyes scanning the estate with a calm satisfaction. "Mon ami," he said, noting Hastings' furrowed brow, "you are like a dog with a bone, unwilling to let go. The case is solved, Sir Reginald is guilty, and the poem's purpose is clear, yet you frown. What is it?" Hastings shifted his valise to his other hand. "It's that wretched poem, Poirot. 3 more remain, their secrets to keep. Even if Sir Reginald—"
You too. There is a shadow we have not yet illuminated. Let us make one final inquiry before we leave." They returned to the study, where Lady Eleanor was sorting through her late husband's papers, her expression weary but resolute. She looked up as they entered, her silver hair catching the light. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I thought you'd gone. Is something wrong?" "Perhaps, madame," Poirot said, his tone courteous but probing. "Your letter to Monsieur Crane, urging his silence about the scandal, it was a significant clue, but it raises a question. Why did Crane keep it, hidden in his room, after so many years? And why did he return to Ravenwood now, with a poem that threatened to expose not just Sir Reginald, but others?" Lady Eleanor's hands paused over the papers. I don't know why he kept it. Charles always said Victor was sentimental, clinging to the past. As for his return, I invited him to honor Charles's memory, but I sensed he had another purpose. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Another purpose, oui. Let us consider the other guests. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, for instance. His interest in Crane's mind was more than professional, I think. His alibi, the solitary walk, was unverified. Might he, too, have a connection to the scandal? Before Lady Eleanor could respond, a soft knock interrupted. Dr. Fraser himself stood at the door, his bearded face tense. "I overheard your conversation, Monsieur Poirot," he said, stepping inside. "I came to return a book to Lady Eleanor, but I cannot stay silent any longer." Hastings' pulse quickened, but Poirot remained serene, gesturing for Fraser to continue. "Speak, doctor. The truth, it is like a river. It finds its way." Fraser took a deep breath, his calm facade cracking.
Victor Crane wasn't just a patient to me. Years ago, during the scandal, I was a junior doctor in London. I falsified a report, at Sir Reginald's request, to support the forgery accusations against Crane. It was a small thing, a medical certificate claiming Crane was unfit, to discredit him further. I was paid well, and I thought it harmless. But Victor found out, somehow, before he came here. He confronted me privately the night before his death and said his poem would name me. Hastings gasped. "Good Lord, Fraser, you had a motive to kill him!" Fraser shook his head vehemently. "I didn't kill him. I was ashamed, yes, but I urged him to let it go. I was in the garden that morning, as I said. I couldn't face him after our talk, but I swear I didn't touch him." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "And yet, Doctor, you said nothing of this until now. Why?" Fraser's shoulders sagged. "Fear. Shame. I thought if I stayed silent it would pass. But when you revealed Sir Reginald's guilt, I realized the truth would come out eventually." Poirot nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Merci." The scandal was a web, ensnaring many. Sir Reginald, who orchestrated it, Lady Eleanor, who sought to protect her husband's legacy, and you, who played a small but shameful part. Crane's poem threatened you all, but only Sir Reginald acted with violence. Lady Eleanor's eyes glistened. "Charles knew, didn't he? That's why he kept those papers, to protect us all." "Oui, madame," Poirot said. "Your husband was a keeper of secrets, but he chose mercy over justice. Crane, however, chose truth, and it cost him his life." As they left the study, Hastings whispered, "That's it then. The poem's 3 more referred to Sir Reginald, Eleanor, and Fraser, their shared secret from the scandal." "Exactement," Poirot said. "The poem was Sir Reginald's ruse, but it reflected a deeper truth, the lingering guilt of those involved. The shadow is gone, Hastings. The case is closed." They stepped into the hall where the car waited to carry them away. Ravenwood Hall stood silent, its secrets finally laid bare, and Hastings felt a quiet relief as they drove into the fading light, leaving the echoes of the past behind. Chapter 14. The Lingering Echo. Witnessing the Ravenwood Hall was quiet, the Devon countryside unfolding in a patchwork of green hills and mist-kissed hedgerows under the late afternoon sun. Poirot, seated beside Hercule Poirot in the back of the motorcar, felt the weight of the past days begin to lift, though a faint unease lingered like the echo of a distant bell. The murder of Victor Crane, Sir Reginald Thorne's unmasking, and the confessions of Lady Eleanor and Dr. Malcolm Fraser had unravelled the mystery, yet the cryptic poem's haunting rhythm. 3 more remain, their secrets to keep, still tugged at his thoughts. Poirot's eyes opened. His finger. "It's all settled. Is it?" He sensed a hesitation. A secret she held back, not out of guilt, but out of loyalty. "We shall make one final stop before we return to London." At Poirot's request, the driver turned the car toward the nearby village of St. Mary's Cross, where Clara Thorne had gone to stay with a cousin following her father's arrest. The small cottage, nestled between a church and a brook, was modest but welcoming, its garden bright with late summer roses. Clara greeted them at the door, her pale face marked by exhaustion but softened by relief at being away from Ravenwood.
"Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings,"
she said, her voice steady but quiet.
"I didn't expect to see you again. Is something wrong?"
Poirot removed his hat, bowing slightly. "Mademoiselle, the case is closed, and your father's guilt is certain. But I come to you now not as a detective, but as a seeker of truth. In the parlor, when you spoke of Victor Crane and the scandal, there was something you did not say, a truth you held back. I ask you now, for your own peace, to share it." Clara's eyes widened,
and she sank into a chair, her hands twisting together.
You see everything, don't you?
She murmured.
I didn't lie, Monsieur Poirot. But you're right. There's more. Victor wasn't just threatening to expose Father's role in the scandal. He had proof, a letter, not the one you found, but another, written by my father to Lord Worthington, admitting his part in framing Victor. Victor showed it to me the night before he died. He said he'd hidden it not in his room but somewhere in the library.
Hastings' breath caught.
Another letter? Why didn't you tell us?
Clara's eyes filled with tears.
Because it would destroy Father completely. He's done terrible things, but he's still my father. I thought if Victor was gone, the letter wouldn't matter. But after you exposed Father, I realized it was wrong to keep it hidden.
Poirot's expression softened. Where is this letter, mademoiselle?
In the library.
Clara said.
Inside a hollowed-out book. The poems of Tennyson. Victor showed me where he hid it, said it was his insurance.
Poirot nodded, as if he had expected this. Merci, mademoiselle Clara. You have done right to tell me. This letter, it will confirm the truth, but it will not change the justice that has been served. Your father's fate is sealed, but your conscience, it is now free. They returned to Ravenwood Hall briefly, where Lady Eleanor, still shaken but cooperative, led them to the library. Inside the poems of Tennyson, Poirot found the letter, its ink faded but clear. Sir Reginald's confession to Lord Worthington, detailing his orchestration of the forgery to ruin Crane and secure his own financial gain. Poirot handed it to Lady Eleanor. Madam, this belongs...
Eleanor's hands trembled as she took it.
Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. This house, it will never be the same. But perhaps it can heal now. As they drove away from Ravenwood for the final time, Hastings turned to Poirot. That letter, it could have changed everything if we found it sooner. How did you know Clara was hiding it? Poirot smiled faintly. Her eyes, Hastings, they carried the weight of loyalty and guilt. The poem, the scandal, the secrets, they were all connected. But Clara's silence was the final clue. The little grey cells, they do not rest until every shadow is illuminated. The car rolled on, leaving Ravenwood Hall behind, its secrets finally at rest. Hastings felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth had brought peace, even to a house steeped in darkness. Chapter 15. The Final Verse. The train to London rattled through the twilight, its rhythmic clatter a soothing contrast to the turmoil of Ravenwood Hall. Captain Arthur Hastings sat opposite Hercule Poirot in their first-class compartment, the countryside blurring past in shades of purple and gold. The weight of the case, the murder of Victor Crane, Sir Reginald Thorne's guilt, and the unravelling of secrets old and new had settled into a quiet satisfaction, though Hastings still felt the echo of the cryptic poem's final verse in his mind. The discovery of Sir Reginald's letter, hidden by Clara Thorne, had closed the last gap in the mystery, yet Hastings sensed Poirot was not entirely done with Ravenwood's shadows. Poirot, his hat neatly placed on the seat beside him, sipped a small glass of Sirop de Cassis, his green eyes reflecting the fading light. "Mon ami," he said, noting Hastings' pensive expression, "you are still with the ravens of Ravenwood, are you not? The case is solved, the truth is revealed, and yet you ponder. What is it?" Hastings leaned back, his hands clasped. "It's just... Well, Poirot, you tied it all up so neatly. The poem, the scandal, the letter. But I keep thinking about that line. Tread with care, for death runs deep. It feels like a warning we've only half understood. And Clara, she carried that secret for so long. Will she be all right?" Poirot's lips curved into a gentle smile. "You have a kind heart, Hastings. Mademoiselle Clara, she will heal in time. The truth it is a burden lifted even when it pains. As for the poem, its warning was Sir Reginald's deception, a clever mask to hide his crime. But you are right to sense its depth. It spoke not only of murder, but of the human soul, of secrets that bind us, even when we wish to be free. Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the guest's
Destination. Lady Eleanor will guard her husband's legacy, but with honesty now. Dr. Fraser? He must face his shame. But he's a man of reason. He will endure. The Langleys, their secrets exposed, may find their marriage stronger for it, or not. That is their path. Our task was to bring order to chaos, and that we have done. Hastings smiled faintly. You make it sound so simple, Poirot. But that poem, it gave me the shivers. The way it seemed to predict everything, even if it was Sir Reginald's doing. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The poem was a mirror, Hastings, reflecting the fears and guilt of those it named. Sir Reginald used it to confuse, to suggest a grander scheme, but he could not escape the truth. The ink on his cuff, the rhythm of his cane, the letter he could not destroy, these were his undoing. The little grey cells, they see what the heart tries to hide. The train's whistle sounded, signalling their approach to London. Hastings glanced out the window, the lights of the city beginning to twinkle in the distance. You know, Poirot, I'll never understand how you do it. Seeing through the lies, piecing together the smallest clues. That letter in the book, Clara's hesitation, even the ink smudges, it's like you see the world differently. Poirot chuckled softly. Not differently, mon ami, but clearly. The world, it is a puzzle, and every puzzle has a solution. The method, the logic, the observation. These are the tools of Hercule Poirot. And you, my faithful friend, you help me see the human side, the heart that beats behind the crime. As the train slowed, Poirot rose, adjusting his coat with meticulous care. Come, Hastings. London awaits, and with it, perhaps, a new puzzle. But for now, we rest, content that Ravenwood's secrets are at peace. Hastings followed, his valise in hand, feeling a quiet pride in his friend's brilliance. The cryptic poem, the murder, the tangled web of Ravenwood Hall, it had all been unravelled by Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth. As they stepped onto the platform, the city's bustle enveloped them, and the shadows of Ravenwood faded into memory, leaving only the echo of a final verse, now silent at last.